I am thrilled to present the next panel, Perseverance, Lessons of the Underestimated. We'll dig in on what we can learn from those who may have felt that way or know somebody who have felt that way. But overall, we're going to learn how to create spaces where those who were previously overlooked or underrepresented are appreciated and valued for the work they do. Please join me in welcoming our amazing speakers. With us today, I want to welcome Ruchika Tulshyan, author of the most read Harvard Business Review article of all times. Also with us today, she's also the founder and CEO of Candor. Welcome, Ruchika. Also with us today, she's the corporate vice president of Azure at Microsoft. Merrie Williamson is joining us also today. Welcome, Merrie. And the moderator of this panel is Divya Kakkad, the VP of Marketing at the Female Founders Alliance. So welcome all, and everybody, please enjoy this amazing panel.
Hello. Welcome, everybody. I hope you are all enjoying all of the sessions that we've had so far. I know that I've personally had multiple moments where I've had goosebumps listening to some of our amazing speakers from earlier today. I'm personally excited to be moderating this today's topic on perseverance with our distinguished panel here. I'm joined by personal role model and renowned author and D&I expert Ruchika Tulshyan and longtime tech leader and advocate Merrie Williamson. As we go through the discussion today, I encourage folks to put questions that they may have in the chat so that we can address them through this conversation. And let's just get into it. So Ruchika and Merrie, we invited each of you here because, of course, you are both incredibly accomplished. We know that in your own professional journey, you have been maybe underestimated or overlooked at some point. And we know that in the face of that challenge, you have demonstrated perseverance that we can all learn from. Can you tell us, maybe Ruchika, you can go first, how you tell us about a time that you felt underestimated. How did you respond, and where did you learn to take that approach?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I hope you're having a wonderful time at this amazing summit. I just love the way that it's so actionable every day, and every track has been so thoughtfully curated, and it's really my honor to be here. So thank you to all of you for joining us. Leslie and the Female Founders Alliance team, I love you all, and I just want to acknowledge that, as we continue to be virtual, it means a lot to have all of you join us and host us. So thank you, and Divya, wonderful to be here with you. Merrie, so excited to learn from you. I honestly can't think of a time where I didn't feel underestimated in some way, shape, or form. So it's actually quite hard to pick just one. But, I think the through line in my career and in my life is this idea of storytelling. I started my career as a journalist, and a lot of the work that I was doing meant I was a business journalist, so really surrounded by, very powerful men, both, as peers, as editors, and then certainly the people who I was writing stories about at companies. We know that close to 70+% of corporate leadership in America are white and male. So, that was basically the water that I was swimming in every day. But I also realized that while I was doing that I had a very big advantage as someone who was underestimated and overlooked, and constantly having to advocate for and battle for stories of underestimated communities, of women of color in the workplace, of women, period, in the workplace. And I realized that was actually my advantage, because every time I had to advocate for a story, yes, I had to work harder. Yes, I had to convince more people than any of my male peers. But over time, as I started building up sort of that steady stream of work and articles and writing and stories of underestimated communities, I was really lucky to be joined by a chorus of women and women of color around the country. writing about communities, where now, 15 years later, it's the norm to read about entrepreneurs who are amazing and from underestimated communities. But 15 years ago, this was not the case, especially around business, or especially around VC and entrepreneurship and companies. So really turning that to my advantage, working hard at it, being convinced that this was the story of my lifetime. These were the stories of my lifetime that needed to be told. And I'll sort of end this thought by saying that the quote I turn to all the time is Leslie Feinzig's quote. She gave an amazing speech at the Female Founders Alliance Champion Awards a few years ago. The last time I think it might have been the last time I saw her in person, and she was pregnant. And here she is on stage, and she basically says, when you're invisible, they don't see you coming. I'm paraphrasing terribly, but essentially, when you're underestimated, when you're overlooked, when you're invisible, they don't see you coming. And that has stuck with me, because for so long, being underestimated in the newsroom, and then even when I left professional journalism full time, being underestimated and overlooked for so long meant that people weren't seeing me coming. And so as I started to continue writing those stories, as I started to continue building community around the stories of underestimated women of color, it became what started as, a small movement really now feels like a powerful force. So that's the example I'd love to give.
Thank you. Merrie, what about you?
Yeah, I think on the question of underestimated, it's a very similar answer, different vocation, but similar scenario than Ruchika described. Being my background is in technology. I was an engineer. I had an advanced degree coming out of undergraduate with a master's, and I was underestimated till about 8 weeks ago, I'd say, when I finally got the, cred and the title that now it feels a little bit more bulletproof, but you never know. I'll let you know in about 6 months. So about a couple decades. So underestimated, I think it's really interesting to hear that what I learned being in a predominantly male environment, predominantly white environment, being in the Northwest of the United States, on top of that, the kind of the communities inside the communities, you learn different skills. And I think part of those skills are to the point of they don't see you coming. But they're really skills so you can communicate and construct your strategies in a way that, it can be heard. And I think, and I know we're in a better position today where people's energy of covering and all the things we have to do to be heard is decreasing, but it's certainly still there. But as a technical person, I had to stretch and learn new skills and being a great listener, a great documenter. I wrote great notes to myself on what I was hearing, because quite frankly, for my first decade, I had to be an extraordinary engineer to get the attention with no mistakes. I didn't have the luxury of throwing out crazy ideas in meetings. I didn't have the luxury of having, 2 bad ideas for every 10. And so I was pretty thoughtful about how long I pulled together ideas and a hypothesis, and bringing allies to make sure that I got the right ideas before I pitched them, which turns out to be an amazing skill long term. And on 2 fronts, it stretched me to be a better communicator and leader. It stretched me to be better at clarifying why I thought a good idea was a good idea. And then it became more interesting and more courageous for me to take leaps outside of the mainstream businesses or ideas. Similar to Ruchika, you kind of get that courage to go, okay, now that I have these skills, let me go press the boundaries a little bit and use those to, in our case, forward the business in areas that were exploratory. And so I applied those underestimated powers and then built a brand around being able to do things well and construct stories well and take the technology foundation and lead people and on and on. And so, now I've had the pleasure of being part of an industry transition, this whole cloud era, being part of the Microsoft culture is fantastic because it really aligns with where I want to build the potential of people and the people who work in and around my organization and the organization as a whole. And then every customer we get to touch, I have those moments of showing up authentically, and it's a great feeling. So, I don't know where that'll take me in the next couple of years ahead, but certainly I continue to hope to surprise people.
Wow. Ruchika, you write prolifically on this topic, so apologies for sending a huge question your way, but this could be an entire conversation on its own. But what do you think we can all be doing better to support women in the workplace who are all too often overlooked?
Wow, it definitely could be its own conference. A few of the things that have really been important for me and seeing a shift is this lens that we develop about who is not in the room, or whose voices are missing, or whose voices, as they're trying to speak up, aren't being heard, and developing a really keen sense, a lens, when you're in a meeting. Why is everyone here white? If you're a white person as well, why is everyone here male? Why is everyone else why have the last 5 candidates I've tried to hire for my team all been men, or they've only been from a certain university, or they've only had a certain type of training. So that lens becomes really important. And I would really encourage people to use that lens even beyond the workplace, and even think about how can you cultivate social networks and relationships with people who are very different from you, who are really diverse in every way, race and gender for sure, but also lived experiences, countries they've come from, the immigrant background. I myself I'm an immigrant woman of color. And it's always surprising to me in the United States that there still seems to be so much of separation between people from different communities. So I think to support women in the workplace, and specifically women of color, which is my focus, it has to be that everyone here, allies as well as other women, especially other women of color as well, we all need to develop that lens and advocate for, really sponsor, not just mentor, not just, hey, how are you feeling today? Let me be your shoulder to cry on, but more like, what are those really key things you want to achieve in your career? I see this potential in you. I'm going to put your name forward. And for me, that has meant, whether it's through opportunities for speaking and being on a visible stage, whether that's when I continue to write on the experience of people in the workplace. Even when I center women of color, it's not just, women of color, can you tell me your story so that I can write about you? But who are the experts that I talk to? What sort of data do I use when I put together my stories, right? And so it's developing that lens of who has traditionally been overrepresented and who has traditionally been underrepresented and overlooked, and how can we propel those voices in the latter community forward.
Merrie, you talked a little bit about how, when you're starting off in your career, you don't want to do anything wrong, right? When you're the minority in the room, you want to make sure you're taking all the right steps. You don't want to fall out of line. But then, as someone who has been, who has sort of built their career and is now a leader and has all this merit and this credibility, do you see that as a responsibility? Like, do you identify as someone who has persevered, and what do you think people that are looking at you, other women, in tech that are looking at you, are what can they learn from you and from your story?
Yeah, I love that. I love the question. I was thinking about it for a bit, and perseverance wasn't one of the word categories and the word jumble I would put in mine, but I really like it because it feels so positive versus negative. Like, persevering is an action that I own. Yeah. First, I guess for me, if I pause in your question and say, okay, now where I am today, what does that mean? isn't an accomplishment in and of itself. And I don't think so. I think it gives me an opportunity. And as you have more opportunity to speak, lead, and make choices, the thing that I tell my organization and global organization every day is I want to build the place I wish I was in anytime in my career. And so that's what motivates me to create a place for you to show up and give your best, which means that might not be 5 days a week. That means you need to check out in mental health. That means if you're feeling that you have unique and specific conflict with the people around you that I might understand as a woman, I might understand as a Black woman, but I might not because you're in India or you're in Germany or you're in Singapore. I want you to have some space to talk about that. So to do that, I've learned that takes a lot of authenticity and storytelling for me. And that is unique in that I didn't have role models ahead of me as female leaders in tech that were talking about, I'm a partner, I'm gay, I have children, I struggle with all of the things that are on my plate. I think there was a barrier for the generation ahead of me to be authentic like that, and it was seen as a weakness. And so I've kind of tried something new over the last 2, 3, 5 years and said, all right, I'm going to keep spooning out a little bit more of my authenticity to see if it helps land the message. And I think it really works. And it kind of is scary, and you never know how some of these things are going to land. But I think that for the connection between kind of perseverance, there's a resilience aspect of it, that you first learn resilience and know when you're in a spot where you're feeling, okay, I'm safe for me, and I know what I need, and I know what I need right now. And then you can, when you're in that good spot, be courageous and authentic. And then to Ruchika's point, then you have to have that like gut check circle. Could be formal mentors and sponsors, but a lot of times I think it's the people you go to say, am I in the place? Like if you're frustrated and you want to be growing, or you're frustrated and you're managing all of these things, those are the people to say, you're right, you're not in a good place. You should explore something new because you're amazing. Or your frustration might be something you need to kind of huddle in right now and take care of yourself and do some self-care. And so I think those are the types of conversations I like to have now, which were absolutely not the first 10 years of my life when I was, heads down and trying to prove things out. So I'm hoping that everyone here is taking some time to do that. And hopefully the whole experience today is part of that self-care, is part of that, building your authenticity and resiliency.
So many powerful insights there. I can say this as part of, being, having my own career for about 12 years. And it's only in the last 2 years as being part of this team where I see, how being part of a team that shows up authentically and working for a leader like Leslie, who is, an authentic person, tries to live that every day. I can see how that has a ripple effect as, a team, and how that sort of motivates all of us to just do our best and show up in owning our stories. Like you said, there's power in that, being able to say, no, I have a mom, I have 2 little kids. I would have never here before be, brave enough to say, no, I need to leave at 3:30 or 4. I need to go pick up my kid because I don't want to be the last mom at daycare. Like I want to be able to do that and not feel like I'm being judged for it, right? Like it's so I think to all the things that you said, you have to practice it, and it takes a while to live it every day, but there is so much power in it. And I think that is perseverance. It's sort of showing up, having the courage to show up every day, owning that story. Ruchika, what do you think the world is missing when we are not making the space for the underestimated?
Yeah, this is a great question. Actually, Merrie, I wanted to talk a little bit about also what you said to kind of bring it back together, is that there is a tremendous cost to us having to have spent the last 10, 15, 20, and then I speak to women who have been in the workforce for even 50 years. There's a tremendous cost that comes from having to feel like you need to put on armor every day to go to your workplace, and you have to hide who you authentically are to feel like you can belong. And even despite that, you never fully feel like you're fully yourself, right? Obviously, there's a cost to that. And I think one of the themes that comes up again and again for me is it is important to acknowledge that it is really hard to do this work. And I know a lot of people, for the sake of their families, for their sanity, for all sorts of reasons, just need to opt out. And I think that is for me something that is very worrisome. That is the big cost we are even seeing right now at this point in the pandemic, when we are losing, I think I read a statistic that gender equity has gone back by many decades, right? Because of the pandemic and because of the overarching trauma that it has raged upon women of color, especially in our communities. So I think we need to acknowledge that is a big risk, and many of us feel that risk both, and that big trauma both intimately from having to deal with going into the workplace every day, which isn't always welcoming, isn't always celebrating us, and feeling like we need to put on the armor. But I think what's interesting and not talked about nearly enough as well is the tremendous cost to people who are also overestimated. So of course there's innovation, there's a lot of data about how diverse teams drives innovation, growth, productivity, all of that, creativity, better outcomes in every way. But I also, time and again, when I work with inclusive organizations or organizations that are on an inclusion journey for a number of years, by the way, which is hard, and there are lots of 2 steps forward, 5 steps back type of situations. But again and again, when I speak with white men, cis, straight, white men, about how when you make room for all different types of leadership, when you make it open, when you make an organization really value diversity and authenticity in a very real way, how it really even benefits them. Many men who identify as introverts have come to me and said, like, hey, it's really great that we've done away from this, culture of where everyone sort of shouts, whoever shouts the loudest or speaks the first is the one that's most valued. And thank you. And I think that's the story where sometimes we don't really hear it nearly enough. Everyone benefits from making room for people who have been underestimated.
Merrie, sorry, did you have to add to that?
No, I love it. I'm kind of living that day to day, where once you start making this a common language for people, and I love this concept of covering and tax, and everyone can almost agree, even if they're coming from a very different worldview, that some people, based on how the world sees them, African American women versus maybe an Asian woman in the United States, will have a different level of that tax that they have to live with inside work. But it's still a much bigger tax than your average cis white male. But no one's at zero. Everyone is feeling exposed when they come to work. They want to be liked. They want to be valued. They fear sharing medical history and things that might preclude them from working an 8-hour day. They might have things going on with their family, taking care of aging parents, children. And if we start opening up some of the hard conversations with people who have a lot of stories and covering, it allows that space for others to share. And it's really, really freeing and striking. And I've been shocked at things that people share, especially outside of the United States, and in places where they feel safe. I had a gentleman in broader Asia, and we were talking about being authentic and challenges of being authentic. And a woman was sharing about how she lost her adult brother, and how affected she was at work, and how scared she was at sharing that. And this gentleman came in and said, I grew up in China. Now I'm married and have a young child, and we're thinking about this with a heavy heart and heavy brain every day of how do I raise that child differently than I grew up, because I grew up in a really bad situation with parents who only valued things that were not love. And I'm at work going, holy crap, I think we're doing something right here, but it's, don't assume that you know what's going on in people's lives. And in particular, I think COVID's opened up the opportunity for people to share, because we have to, and we have to hold each other up right now, and expect people to be leaning on each other and trust each other to share that, because I don't think we have a choice.
You touched on what I was going to ask next. So I'm going to ask you, the opposite of what we call being overlooked is being able to see someone, right? See them and make them feel seen. And this is a skill that we can all work on. But how do we sort of build this muscle in an organization? What are some of the tactical things you can do as a leader for your own team to make your team feel seen and let them feel like they have the space and, to be able to sort of live that?
Yeah. I'll be quick because I know we're all eagerly awaiting the 1 o'clock announcement from Leslie. But I will say psychological safety. And when we look at what super successful teams have in common, there was a study done by Google Project Aristotle, which looked at the most successful teams at Google, and across all measures, the one thing they had in common was psychological safety, and this idea that my team has my back. I can fail, I can take risks, I can ask those stupid questions, and I will still be able to have my status and still be considered, I'll be safe in this team, right? I'll still be a valued member of the team. And I think leaders need to model that. And I think, Merrie, what you talked about, where you can talk about, the reality of what's going on in your life, when you chip away at that armor, when you can be real and say, hey, I'm going to be down for a couple of days because I'm going through this big thing, or a couple of weeks, depending. But, now my cards are face up, right? I'm a leader and my cards are face up, and I want all of you to have your cards face up too. That level of psychological safety is what drives change in the world. And I think it sounds like both of you, Divya and Merrie, have talked about what it's like when you move into environments or start cultivating within your own team that you're building psychological safety, and that big difference between not having it and having it. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, I think that's consistent with what I've seen as well. And I think experiencing being seen is, I think first you need that trust. You're in a place with psychological safety, which leaders are really best positioned to set up. But then there's that courageous step of, do you feel comfortable with being seen? Because for me, the people that I see and help are all so different, and I can understand how to see them and position them for success, or position them so I can help them succeed where they're failing, because I know them. I know how they work. I know their preferences. I know what's the type of style that they have. I know how to support them and their growth and what they specifically are looking for on a daily, weekly, decade-long basis, because they've opened up, and it's not one conversation or one perfect document that says my 5-year plan. It's really knowing somebody. And if you're willing to open that up and you're in a safe place to do that, I think that's really the pinnacle of being seen for who you are and being accepted for that. Whether you're a wild introvert and want to still be like a leader, that is a thing, but you have to be front foot about it and share your strengths and the way you work, and your aspirations, and they all can exist together. You want to be a working mom CEO, talk about that. People come out of the woodwork to say, how can I support you? And I think this is one of those places, which is fantastic.
Thank you for that. Okay, I want to ask a question before we do a final. We'll do one and then one more after this. What is the best career advice that you have received that helped you make the transition? Like if there was one thing that gave you, like somebody else said to you that you had that aha moment for you, what would that be?
I feel like I've said this quite a few times, but I'll say it, yet again. And it's this idea, it's this proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to walk far, go together. And in every big endeavor in my life, it's been about how do I bring others along with me? How do I be part of a team that's, well beyond me, and try and leave a legacy that will last well beyond myself. And I think that needs to be at the forefront. And I think one of the challenges in corporate culture and organizations where psychological safety isn't very isn't apparent or isn't valued is this idea like there can only be room for one leader. There's only room for me to succeed. You have to be strategic as an individual. And for me, I obviously bought into that for a number of years. And when I started shifting my thinking, when I started thinking about where are the rooms where I have influence and privilege, and who can I advocate and sponsor to bring along with me, that has been transformative for my career. So it's that shift in thinking from, where can I succeed to where can we succeed, and whom can I bring along in my journey?
Thank you. Merrie, what about you? What is the one advice that you've received?
I had almost the exact same thing, so I'll pick another advice. It's funny to hear those themes. I think one advice I was seeking mid-career to senior level female leader was, how do I replicate what you've done so I can be successful? And they just looked at me and said, you don't. You have to do your thing to be successful for you in a way I could never see. And it was this simple moment for me that there is no single ladder that we're all climbing and kick each other off the ladder as we climb up. There's multiple ladders, and you're on your own. And also, the same woman said something so poignant and so simple to me, and she's like, and you're at a point you should be asking for help. I had young children at the time. I was trying to do everything. I was up half the night doing baby laundry and email, and she goes, you get someone to do your laundry. Dude, get some help. It's okay to pay somebody for $20 a week to go fold your laundry. And I think that single meeting like literally changed my life, and it was just things that were poignant and timely for me.
Oh my God, this is a whole other conversation that I can have about why it takes us so long to just say, you know what, I'm going to pay someone to do that. This is how I want to spend my time.
There should be a whole book.
Exactly.
Please write that book soon.
Yes.
The book, it's called Drop the Ball by Tiffany Dufu.
And let's put that in the link.
I read Tiffany's book, and I've told her this before, and literally I cried and laughed through every single page. I felt so seen. I read it when my son was 2, I want to say. And until that point, I literally every day I was just like, how am I surviving? Mm-hmm. And I read that book, and I think permission to drop the ball, permission to tell other people, you can drop the ball, and here's how I drop the ball, and pass that wisdom on. It's transformative when we do that for each other, right? Because part of being seen is knowing that our value isn't tied up in how much we produce or how much we do or juggling all the balls, but part of the value is also in encouraging others to drop the ball and doing it ourselves and modeling that.
Yeah.
Love that.
Love it. This is a great segue. Ruchika, you have a book coming out soon. Tell us about it. When is it going to be available? What is it about?
Thank you, Divya. Yes, I'm honored and humbled that I get to tell the stories of so many women of color in my next book. It's called Inclusion on Purpose. It's about actions and intentions that leaders can take to become more inclusive. And I use the data and stories of how women of color face bias and discrimination in the workplace to sort of illustrate some of our big challenges that we're trying to overcome. So Inclusion on Purpose, it drops February 8th, 2022. And thank you. Thank you for...
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Any parting thoughts? You've accomplished so much. What is next for you?
I'm going to change the world, right? I get to talk to people every single day who are running companies from vaccine, logistics, energy. This is in the last 24 hours. And not only do I get to help them change their businesses and reach people in a more modern way that brings value to humans, but I get to show up in my unique way. I have curly hair, I do the big earrings, I wear message t-shirts, because that's who I am. And that's part of the value I bring and the experience I bring. And it's striking as a global company how many people it opens up conversations that are very personal. I saw that you wore an autism shirt, and I would love to talk to you about my family's experience with that. And then I get to establish new relationships with customers and clients, but they're personal, and that's really a fun part of leaving your fingerprints on the world too.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us today and having this amazing conversation. You both are such brave leaders, and it makes me, I'm very humbled to have shared this space with you. And I hope all of you listening, are inspired to show up, be braver, have the courage, just be yourself and drop some balls. It's fine. We're all doing it. Thank you so much. I'm going to close this conversation, and I hope everyone stays for Leslie, who's going to be our keynote speaker and has some very, very interesting news to share. Let's wait for it.
Yes. Thank you so much, Ruchika, Merrie, and Divya. This conversation was so good. So many important things to remember, opening spaces where everyone feels welcome and seen and appreciated, but also the dropping the ball thing. I think we all need that reminder. Like, we need to know when we can say, okay, I'm going to rest, not quit, but rest. Somebody else may be doing something in that time, but I need the time to rest. So thank you so much for this amazing conversation, and thanks for being here today.